me, because probably it's the first time for me to be presenting online via Zoom, and especially on Mentor Hub. So let's knock on wood. The first time, maybe it will be successful. If not, I'm still looking for your feedback. This is the area of my passion, and I'm ready to give up teaching for learning more about books, literacy, reading philosophy, and it's not only about doing it in English language, but doing it in languages we speak, Russian and Uzbek. So right now, I will be using sources and knowledge that I gained using English language. But hopefully, maybe eventually, we will come up with a webinar that we will share when everything is applicable to local books, books in Russian and Uzbek. But I will I will talk about Russian books and Uzbek books anyway. So let's get started. Okay, so you've seen this, and if you have noticed, it says teacher of English in lower grades. And that means I've been teaching in TIS. I worked in TIS for about 6 years. And for the first 3 years, I worked as a teaching assistant. And for the last 3 years, I worked as an English language teacher. We call it ELL. So because this is an international school, and the one classroom has consists of students from different countries. Most of them may not speak English. Some of them can speak English. Like it's unknown, unpredictable. So a teacher is always there to teach just English because the whole program is delivered in English. Before TTS, I used to I'll share a little bit of my background. I went to Narcos here, State University of Economics, and I worked in accounting sphere for 2 years. But I realized this is a completely different world, not the world that I want to be in. Numbers, documents. So I decided to give that up and do whatever I did before I started university life. That was volunteering, teaching students, children English, working with children, organizing educational projects. Some of you may know my mom, Rashidova from Usti. And having that kind of mom means you're always busy, your weekends, your evenings, your school life, it's always busy. So maybe that influenced me deciding my career on, and I went to study in World Languages University and acquired degree in Westminster PG Cert with Yelena Wolf. Okay, so here, my statement here is that whatever you hear today, you'll be able to apply whether you teach English or you don't teach English, or you speak Russian or Uzbek. Yes, I will be referring to experience and strategies applied in international, but we can apply it all here, having Uzbek books, having Russian books, and we will talk about them later.
Sorry, Saida, could you please unmute yourself? I muted you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah, shall I go back to any slide?
We
No?
just couldn't hear the last second, maybe.
Okay. So the agenda for today is, what is our role as a teacher when we want our children or our students teach reading? What specifically we need to do? We'll also talk about reading levels, and this is what I would like to talk about. I won't be saying just write books all the time, but I will be saying reading levels, most of the time, because the concept of just right books is for students, for mainly for children or students to understand. But usually for teachers, it's the reading level based on which we pick just right books. We will talk about a little bit assessment and their principles, but you know, this is a whole separate webinar if we focus on this, because this book has like so many chapters on assessment, and if that will be also your area of interest, we may do another webinar. I'm really interested in applying these tools in real life situations. So, but today we will just cover it on a surface level. Other like strategies, other role for us is demonstrating strategies to read. Like we, as teachers, we shouldn't be just talking about it or reminding about it, but we should be showing how to do it. It's very, very important. So demonstrating, showing strategies to read. And of course, not the last, just write books and lots of samples. I've organized mini library over here. I may do a little tour once we're done with slides. So samples are here, including local books, Russian, Uzbek, and international published in the West. And I will also share some resources for online reading with students, children. So you can use online platform, which is very vital right now. Okay, now we'll have to do a little survey so I know who is my audience. The questions are, how many of you teach lower grade? How many, I'll have to turn off my Telegram, I'm sorry, I forgot. Quit Telegram, okay. Yes, so the survey is, how many of you teach in lower grades? Do we have teachers here who teach either in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, grade 5, 3, 4, 5? Are you a homeroom teacher, куратор, классный руководитель? Are you an English teacher? Just let us know with a symbol, yeah? How many of you teach in higher grades, like 5 to 11, or maybe university students? I didn't mention it here, but I mean it, like teenagers and higher, older students. How many of you have children up to, like from 0 to 10, 12 years old? How many of you are parents in this, in our audience? And how many of you struggled when you were children and learned how to read? So we will have the survey in our Zoom.
Okay.
And please take a couple,
I started the poll. Can you see the poll?
Thank you, Ms. Nadira. Yeah, I can see it. Maybe I should answer too.
Yeah, it's up to you. I don't know if it says, yeah.
So we have 17.
Yes. Okay, yeah, people started answering. So 9 people answered. Yeah, 12 out of 13, 14 people answered, 15. 17.
We can see 66% have voted.
Yeah, so 22.
That's more than half. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Anyone else? I'll end the poll.
So have you ever struggled when learning to read? 78%. Do you have children from 0 to 12 years old? 52% no, 48% yes. Do you teach lower grades? 61%. No. Yes, 22%. And I used to teach before, but not now. 17%.
Okay, I'll end the poll and publish the results so that everyone can see. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Now everyone can see the results.
So as you see, we don't have that many teachers teaching in lower grades. Maybe because majority of people here are teachers of English, right? And in lower grades, I know that it has been a compulsory teaching English in lower grades too, but maybe we don't have that many of them here. So children up to 10, 12 years old, 50 to 50, and struggle when learning to read, that's what I was looking forward. Because if you will be listening today and you don't teach children, or you don't have your own children, but if you were a child who struggled when learning, you will still have connections when we will be discussing some issues. So thank you for your answers. I'm going to move to the next slide. Okay, here's a little story of my first book. Everyone knows this book, right? We were children, and Nikolai Nosov, Neznayka, Belmasvoy was very popular when I was a child. And I used to live in Samarkand, and in 1995, we moved to Tashkent. And when we moved to Tashkent, I had a luck to go to a gymnasium under World University of Diplomacy and Economy. And we had the greatest teachers ever, especially language teachers, Russian, Uzbek, and English. So my Russian teacher tells me, Saida, get up. So do you read books? And I'm like, yes. What are you reading right now? And to tell you the truth, this was the only book I read by grade 5. I mean, that was the only book ever I touched, I opened, and I started reading. And I'm like, Незнайка и его приключения Незнайки и его друзей. And she's like, okay, tell me something about this book. And I'm like, and I couldn't say a word, and I couldn't retell anything because I read the title, I read pictures, but I didn't know what was going on. I was just reading letters. I didn't understand the concept. And this is the story I still keep with myself, because when we think of what is reading, we know that it's combining meaning, language structure, and phonics. In my case, to make sense of text. In my case, it was just phonics. It was just letters, and I was deciphering symbols, letters, in grade 5. And that was not a fun process. I was just reading because my mom told me to read, and I was reading, and I didn't like it at all. And my teacher said, if you can't tell a word about your book, it's obviously you don't like it, or you don't understand it. You have to have another book. And so she gave me another book, and that was the start of me starting reading books, because she challenged me, she asked questions, and I had to understand what I was reading. So what is our role as teachers, maybe as parents or as educators, when we want to teach reading to our students? First of all, we need to assess children's reading or students' reading. We need to understand what's their level and what they are capable of. Then we demonstrate effective reading strategies. We will talk about it later, but one of the most favorite strategy for me is a read aloud, and I have a huge section for read aloud. Then we provide children with opportunities to read and practice a variety of approaches to text. That means bringing books, showing books, talking about books, discussing, and sharing them, this world of books, when we provide those opportunities. And then we hear how they read or listen to what they think about their own reading, and we respond and provide feedback about their reading, and encourage them to reflect what they think about their reading, why it was good, why it was bad, and push them to reflect. So here are some reading levels. Here are some reading level systems, and I got it from newsela.com. I will have newsela.com in my reference online resources list as a nonfiction reading resource. It's leveled, and you can use it for as a reading tool with grades up higher than 5th grade and up. So there are lots of them: AR, DRA, Fountains and Pinnell, Lexile, and GRL. But in lower ages, in children who are just starting to learn reading, Fountains and Pinnell is the most popular one. Especially I got to learn about it when I got to TIS. I had no idea what Fountains and Pinnell was. And every time I saw teachers assessing students at least 3 times a year using Fountains and Pinnell worksheets, that would tell me a lot about where the student is and where the student got. So here are reading levels according to capstonepop.com. Capstone Pop is a reading resource. I didn't list it here because it requires a password. I've listed all free resources so you can check them out later. And this one, the blocked column, is basal level. We don't need it, so I decided to cross it out so you don't have to question yourself, what is this? So we have 4 levels, stages in reading. The first one is emergent. And emergent applies to kindergarten and grade 1. And the very first level they start reading is A, because Fountains and Pinnell is defined with symbols based on alphabetical system from A to Z. So if a child comes to kindergarten and they just start learning letters, that's their A level. They may start learning it earlier, maybe in preschool or with parents, and probably if you set them A anymore, maybe they're B, C, depending on how often they worked on their letters or phonics. Then we have early stage. So early stage, as I worked in grade 1, I knew that by the end of grade 1, student had to become J level. And that meant that they start with A or B or C, because in kindergarten, they don't grow that fast. They come with A, they learn B, C, and they don't have, like if you see here, for kindergarten, it says the expectation when they finish kindergarten has to be E, but usually most kids come with A, B, C, like 1 or 2 can be E. And by the end of grade 1, they are J level. We won't be looking at these letters so much. It's just this general concept that in the beginning, this is like a continuum, long line. In the beginning, it's A, and then they transition from one grade to another grade, to another grade, to another grade. And by the end of grade 5, they have to finish all stages. So it's emergent, early fluent, or it's called transitional, and then fluent. Before we talk about emergent, early fluent, and fluent, I would like to talk about pre-emergent, because I'm a parent and I have a 3-year-old girl, and because my passion is books, and I'm doing as much as I can to introduce books in life of my daughter. And I wanted to focus that when we bring books into life of toddlers or newborns, the goal is to introduce the storyline, pictures, art, emotions, the plot, so child develops oral speech, not letters, not symbols, not numbers. So whenever I hear such methods like методика Домина, Глеба, I might forget it. I might have forgotten it. It's called when you show cards to a toddler and they have to memorize words. Something called Gleb Doman. Maybe I'm wrong right now.
No, yes, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and they have to memorize as many words, as many letters as possible. They are like, they can't walk, they can't talk, but they have to remember those words. Or introduce letters as soon as possible. As soon as child starts talking, they have to start learning A, B, V, G, D, or in Uzbek. You know, that's this strive to teach to teach children as early as possible letters is crazy, and I'm against it as a teacher, as an educator, because when I introduce books to my child or to any child around me, I'm not focusing on letters, I'm not focusing on symbols, because these are symbols for children that they have to decipher, and that requires cognitive skills that come later. Which is what is more important is their oracy, their speech, the vocabulary, what they acquire from a book. And in this book of my favorite Russian specialist from Russia, Marina Aramstam, she runs an internet journal called Top Mom Book. She says that how speech therapist, logoped, defines whether a child is ready to go to school. So they put sequential cards like these in front of a child, not letters, not numbers, not a book with sentences and text, just pictures. And they ask a child to describe those. So a child has to be able to describe. First, I take 2 pieces of, like 2 loaves of bread. Then I put butter, and then I cut cheese. So the child has to be able to describe all these processes. And if the child can do it, then he's ready for school. He can learn letters. He or she can learn, you know, writing and literacy and numbers and math. So what is more important for parents and teachers to give, like, you know, all this pachimuchka, all those fancy methods that teach a child to read at age 4 or 5. I always doubt how much a child is having fun or, you know, actually liking or loving the process of reading. Of course, we have exceptions. We may have exceptions, like a child can be genius and, you know, strive for it individually, automatically, without parents pushing it. That's another situation. But when parents push it, I don't think that's healthy. One day the child will say, I'm tired of your letters, of your books. I don't want it anymore in my life. I have a little video here of my child reading a picture book. So my daughter is now 3 years old, and this book she's reading when she was like 1.5. And when I say reading, I don't mean she's reading words. I mean she's reading pictures, like here. And how did that happen? She didn't just take the book and start reading pictures. No, that happened after I took the book. I started reading it aloud, showing pictures, showing details, emotions, frustration. You know, this book is about 2 friends being very good friends, and they go outside to play. And then the rain starts pouring and the whole fun moment goes away and they start crying, no, it's raining. So the illustrations are very vivid. And what a child in 2 years old, of a 2 years old can know, like can read is emotions, is a face expression. So I didn't know she was reading, but I peeked and made a video, little video. So please let me know if you can hear it. Okay. Can you hear the sound?
Я не бьюсь. Еще буду делать. И делать. Можно учить? Да. Nice.
Okay, so as you see, just little thing, you may have noticed that the book is in English and I didn't read it to her in English. And maybe this has nothing to do with Just Right books, but I think it does. Because I believe as an English language teacher, I don't think the first thing my child has to learn is English language. Because it's research proven, and I learned that at my new position during my work at TIS, that mother tongue, the importance of mother tongue, whether it's Uzbek, Russian, Chinese, Hindu, whatever it is very, very important. Unless a child or a new person knows a mother tongue in a very strong level, so a child can think in that language. You may not guarantee that a new language can be taken into another levels. So what we learned as ELL teachers, teachers of English, when teaching students coming from different countries to study in international school, is that at home, it's better for them to speak in their mother tongue. Usually we say mother tongue, we say home language. At home, it's beneficial for them to read in home language. And if they have strong connections in their mother tongue, then they can have strong connections in a second language. It's very, very crucial. So what my daughter is doing here, she's not reading English letters at all. She doesn't even know that this story can sound in English. What I did is, because I couldn't find such book in Uzbek, what I did is I just read it to her in Uzbek and in Russian. Actually, honestly, it's Russian. I'm just introducing Uzbek. It's for now, our mother tongue is Russian. And another point of view, when we have that kind of students, when they don't know what letters are, when they don't go to school yet or preschool, but you want them to having that experience with books, how to hold it, how to turn pages, how to read pictures. Another genre is rhymes, songs, tongue twisters that they delivered in books. So I have a whole set of books that you read as a book, but it's a tongue twister, or it's a poem, or it's a rhyme. Because what you can do is just say a poem or say a rhyme orally, right, without touching the book. But when you have a new book, a book that delivers that rhyme or tongue twister or a song, you may be sure that it adds new words into your child's vocabulary or your student's vocabulary. And it gives a chance to revisit high frequency words. And we will talk about what high frequency words are. And also it improves memory. And of course it's fun. Rhyming words, tongue twisters are fun, especially if you read them quickly or you read them in funny voices with emotions. and if it's clear, if the meaning is clear. So over here, that was like just yesterday, my child asked me to read Julia Donaldson, The Everywhere Bear book in Russian. And this is a book about class students in a class listening to their teacher, but they have a bear to share in a classroom. So this bear goes to each student's home and shares some time and place, but then suddenly the bear gets lost, and it's a whole adventure how the bear gets back home. And Julia Donaldson is very, very popular for writing with poems, with rhymes. She has Gruffalo book, The Gruffalo's Child. These are the most popular books. And this one is about class of students.
Olli.
Sali, Zozice, Матемы,
Leo и Тео.
Матемы, Били, Сирия, Абдул Мухаммед, Лези, мы, Синовики, мы, Каун, Хэн, Кабы, Манькили, Месси, Непосета.
Классный медведь. Где он? Где классный медведь? Покажи. Вот тут.
So when I say memorizing or improving a memory, I don't mean for us to sit with a child and memorize it again and again, like, you know, when we did it before утренники in schools, you know, before concerts, when you have to memorize, or a teacher sits down with you, memorize, and then you go and then you present it to audience, or you present it in New Year's and Santa gives you a gift. No, I don't mean that. This process is very natural when a book is really good to read, especially if a parent or adult or a teacher reads aloud, and child comes asking, can you read it again? Can you read it again? Can you read it again? And you don't even notice that some parts, whenever you read it again and again, a student or a child starts memorizing. And then when you open it like 50th time and you hear a child saying it, you're like, oh, wow, you memorized it. So this is a really, the power of read aloud. That's something that I'm exploring with my child. I'm sorry that I'm talking about my child a lot because I don't have another student to share, and I don't have another permission to share other students' work. So I'm using my own child. Now, we talked about these strategies are for students before they go to school. Now let's talk about those who start going to school and they, what kind of characteristics they should have. So the first level is emergent readers. And emergent readers, if they can understand that print contains consistent message, they apply to that level. They recognize some high frequency words, names and simple words and context. They use pictures to predict meaning. They attend to left to right, top to bottom directionality. They identify some initial and ending sounds and words. They use prior knowledge and their own experience to make meaning. So if you give a child a book about, let's say, science, rockets, if a child doesn't have a prior experience to connect to that, that will be really hard. But if a child loves dolls or cars, and if you give a book about cars or dolls, then this is a really good book. And they use repetitive story patterns and language to help with fluency. So I have one little video to share that identifies books for emergent readers. So my internet connection is probably slow. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes. Is it a video or just a music?
I'm here to welcome you to energy training for volunteers working with students
Saida.
learning to read.
Yeah.
We're going to break this into
Is it a video
four
or just audio?
It should be a video. And
I think you're not sharing your screen. So
early
because we
readers,
still can see your slides.
transitional readers, and fluent readers. Some of the work you do.
And reshare your screen.
Okay. Thank you.
With the different levels of reading will be the same, and some is based on their needs. So let's start, first of all, with emergent readers. Emergent readers know nothing. They are just starting. Their first book would probably look like this and have 2 words in it. Huggles breakfast. A carrot, a cake. Now, that looks like big words. Actually, the only word they have to know is A, and the picture will tell them carrot. The picture will tell them cake.
So I'd like to make a little comment here. I don't know whether it's loud enough. So this is a book that an emergent reader would get. And look at these words, a carrot, a cake. So what they read first is the letter A. And they may not know the word carrot or cake, but they see the picture. And it's okay to read looking at a picture. So here, a carrot, even if they don't know how to write or read carrot, or a cake. And that is proven to be effective method to eventually bring students to know what the word carrot is or what the word cake is.
So when teaching a student like this to read, you want to cover the words with your hand or a piece of paper and ask them to look and see what do they see in the picture. What is Huggles eating? You're going to tell them Huggles because that's the title. So this is called a picture walk. So you
Okay, I'm going to stop it here because we may run out of time, and I will continue my slides. So the next level is early readers. Early readers, they recognize most high-frequency words, and this is what I would like to highlight. High-frequency words, in other words, they are called magic words, sight words, or dolch words. And I will come back to the rest of the list. I would like to show you high-frequency words. Here are 100 words that are the most frequent in English language. So when a child in grade 1 comes to learn to read, they get the first column. It's called gold words. A, in, that, and, is, the, be, if, to, I, of, was. And when they finish learning how to read it, and all they have to do is just memorize. No other techniques, no other strategies. Just to learn to read these high-frequent words. Why they're high-frequent? Because you can see them in all texts, in all kind of books. And if you can see them, if you can highlight them, if you can identify them and read them, then your fluency rate can go higher. And if you see, this is assessment sheet, and it says name, date, term, week. And when a student says, okay, I wanna check how many magic words I know, and then they start reading one by one, and a teacher ticks each of them, and then in the end, out of 100, how many students can read fluently without hesitation, without pause? And if you see them in September, how many words they read in September, in the beginning of the year, and then in the end of the year, you can see that sometimes we show that to a student. We say, look, you are reading 90 words out of 100 words. And they're like, whoa, yay. So they really celebrate their own accomplishment of knowing so many words. And when they read books, They're like, oh, look, I found a high frequent word. I found here. We don't say high frequent with children. We say magic words. Oh, they may say, Miss Saida, I found a magic word here. I found magic word there. I was reading it yesterday with my mom. So it's very fundamental for them to learn magic words, to read magic words in the beginning while they start reading all kinds of text. And me and my students, we made an alphabetical order of these words. So we may read them in alphabetical order. That was important for ELL students that, you know, they don't know when to read C as K or when to read it as C. So they just needed the system. And if we go back to the stage of early readers, they recognize most high frequency words. They use pictures to confer meaning. You see, pictures are everywhere. So without pictures, we cannot imagine the development of successful readers. They can retell a story or recount things they've learned. They're becoming more skilled at monitoring, cross-checking, and self-correcting reading. So for self-correcting, it's a very important skill, because sometimes when students read, if they don't understand, they have made an error after they heard it, we have to, as a teacher, push them to stop, reread, and correct them. But if they do it independently, that's a good sign. It's not considered as error. And then they're gaining control of reading strategies. They use their own experiences and background knowledge to predict meaning. So as you see, using their own experience and background knowledge is very important when reading. So it makes reading authentic when we give books that have connection to children's life. Like, you know, I help my mom. I clean plates, or I play with my friends, or I do my homework. So those books that have something to do with their life experience have really big power in their development as readers. And I will go back to our table of those stages here. So we covered emergent and early stages. For emergent, that was from A to E. For early, grade 1, from F to K. But here in Russian language system, teaching system, and even in Uzbek, we don't have that. I actually thought maybe Russian language system has developed so far that they already introduced something similar to this. But I learned that they haven't done that yet. When a child learns Russian alphabet, they learn Russian alphabet, and then they start reading by syllables, читаем по слогам, right? And as soon as they finish that stage, that's it. They get a book like with lots of text, and they're expected to read this bunch of text. They don't have the stages. And the same system is in Uzbek, which maybe eventually we'll try to change. So the last two stages, early fluent or transitional, and fluent. So these are grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, and grade 5. And we will go back to our slides. High frequency words. Transitional readers. Now they know alphabet. They can make meaning of their words. Now we are past the stage of high frequency words, because high frequency words, if you mastered 100 words, then you get the second 100, 200 high frequent words. If you've mastered 200, then you get another 100, like 300. So, and these are not verbs separately or nouns separately or pronouns separately. These are a mix of words. And there has to be, it was researched in New Zealand by 2 educators. And they created a whole system how to identify those high frequent words. And after they've done that research, they've introduced it to all educators. And now, like, lots of educators are using their system. So in transitional readers, they're past the stage of high frequent words. They recognize an increasing number of words that are difficult or content related. They integrate meaning, syntax, and phonics more consistently. So it's not just words separately, or it's not just letters separately. It's all together. They have a variety of ways to figure out unfamiliar words. So in this book, and I didn't include it here, it has lots of information of how we can help students to read unfamiliar words. And there are lots of strategies. If we talk about it, that's gonna be another 40 minutes. So I don't wanna lecture about that and take your time. But there are strategies. And they can generally read independent level text with fluency, expression, and proper phrasing. These are transitional readers. And over here, I have another video to share. We're not gonna watch it. It's another sample of book. So you can see those levels that we mentioned in that table, what kind of books they read, what they look like. But I have them here on my table, so I will show them later. And the last stage, grade 5 stage, they identify most words automatically. They consistently monitor, cross-check, and self-correct reading, like in the previous stage. They read chapter books. Chapter books are very popular in America and Europe, and these are the books that actually make students love reading. For example, Harry Potter books that consist of 7 books. We may also call them chapter books, but it's not leveled. It's not. It's high for high readers. But if you see that kind of books, like for example, Roald Dahl's books, they are chapter books, and there are lots of variety of chapter books. And there's one book called in English, The Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and I saw it recently in Knizhny Mir in Tashkent in Russian as a chapter book, and I was like, yay, finally we have something like that. Dnevnik Slabaka. It has lots of illustration, it has lots of easy print, big print, and very fun to read for children. They offer their own interpretation of text based on their personal experience. So in the previous levels, they would rely on their personal experience. Here, they would give a new interpretation. And they read for a variety of purposes. And they may read a variety of genres independently. What we do as teachers usually, if a child is on, let's say, transitional level, we organize a read aloud, or I will talk about strategies later. Another kind of demonstrative strategy or a reading session, but we take a higher level. But when we talk about just write books, imagine you're picking a clothes for your child, right? I will stop sharing here. So because this is very important. Imagine you're picking a cloth or a t-shirt or trousers for a child. What we usually do, we pick one size bigger than they wear, right? So if they grow, the clothes still fits. With books that they have to read independently, it doesn't work like that. They have to read something that fits them right now. It's just right. And there's a strategy for teaching children to know how to pick those books. These are a variety of genres for students to read, and you know them. We'll talk about assessment a little later. Here, this one was what I was going to show you. 5-finger rule. Probably this is the most important slide of this webinar. This poster is available everywhere around classroom, in the library, in student folders, And this concept is being taught to all grades, no matter whether they can read or not, they have to know the 5-finger rule. So they open the book. They go and they want to choose a book to read. They open a book. If they see one word that is unfamiliar, then it's too easy. They shouldn't be picking that kind of book. If they see 1 or 2 words unfamiliar for them, unknown, and they don't know how to read it or what it means, then this is the right book for them to read. 3 to 4, they might give it a try, but they may return it and not finish it. 5+, too hard. So this is the rule we teach students to use when choosing a right book. And additionally, they also rely on the cover. They always say, when you ask a student, how did you choose a book to read? They say, I looked at the cover. If I read the title and I could read it, and I looked at the pictures, I liked it, I picked it. But then later, when they start reading, they may realize it has too many unknown words. So then they, after listing it and looking at it and looking at the pictures, they realize they don't understand what the pictures mean because they can't read it. They bring it back and choose another one. Or they ask a teacher to read it aloud. So how teachers assess students before knowing what book to assign or help them to assign? So they read with a student and conference regularly, one-on-one. You meet a student, you ask them what they're reading, they read it aloud to you, you make notes, and when you do it a couple times, you show your notes to a student saying, buddy, you're reading a very difficult book, let's pick another one. Or you read this words unclearly last time, but this time you're reading it. So we always ask a student to come to read with us and we give a feedback. And usually they may think that this is a time when they're being criticized or being, judged. But actually conferencing is not about criticism, it's not about judging, it's about giving feedback and asking how well they're doing. And if the book is too hard, maybe it has to be changed, or if it's just right, what exactly they like about the book. Self-correction is a really good sign. Misspelling words, omitting or adding words, these are errors. And there's a whole system how to calculate errors. We're not going to go to that. Just in simple words, you give a student 100 words to read, and we take that as 100%. From 95% to 100%, accuracy is easy book. So if they can read up to 100, like almost 100%, all 100 words, then this is an easy book. If the rate is from 90% to 94, then this book is instructional. They need someone to read it with them. And if the rate is below 89, then the book is hard. So this is how we as teachers know that the book is not just right. And we help students to pick those just right books. About classroom library, or I might have said home library too. Sharon Taberski refers to researchers that say that environment, whether it's home or school, is another teacher, is a teacher who can give you a knowledge, but depending on what students see in that environment is very important. How we can demonstrate strategies. We read aloud higher level books. During read aloud, we stop and ask them, what do you think will happen next? Okay, this is one of the questions. There are many questions we can ask, but we stop and make students pause and think, what may happen after she turns another page? And share reading with a teacher, like this is traditional strategy for our system. We do that all the time. Guided reading is a mini group when all students have the same book of their same level and they take turns to read books. And the teacher sits down and listens what they read, how they read, and then asks questions in mini group. And independent reading. For independent reading, they can take any books to explore, higher, lower, doesn't matter. They have all the freedom. This is also important for them to explore. But they may not actually pick a book to read. They may just explore them and that's it. But this is also important. So a teacher should demonstrate how to do that. And conferencing, conferring with the student. Now, I'd like to show you some books that I picked. Nodrapa, do we have still time? Shall I make it shorter?
Yes, sure. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think we approached the most important part because I'm going to show you some books over here, and I would like to share my little mini library here. I hope you can see it. So
yeah,
these are my books for today. We don't need them. So I picked some books according to stages. So this is a baby books. I call them baby books. The books that they're read for babies that don't talk, don't walk. And the very first book, I didn't know it existed. My friend gave it to me. Actually, my friends give me books, a lot of books, and they know this is the best gift. So imagine this is a child. Tell me if you cannot see it, okay? So imagine this is a newborn child, and you put him like this, and then you open.
Saida, your voice is disappearing.
My voice? Okay.
Yes, now it's okay. Yes, I think when you're moving or.
So imagine this is a child, and you just put these cards in front of them, and the child is seeing the color. That's it. The contrast: white and red, or white and black. That's it. That's the first concept of print of the book. The next stage, so I call it pre-emergent, because in our table we had emergent as first. This was first in our table, but I have this before that one. So that kind of book, I'll take it over here. Okay, that kind of hard book, and child can taste it, try to rip it, and like they're all in English. Unfortunately, I don't have them in Russian or Arabic, but I can talk about sun. I can describe pictures, and I can already talk about what these pictures mean. And I have this a toy book, Twinkle Star. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. I sing it, and she can read it, and it has lines over here. So these are all 0 to 2 years old. The next stage is from 2 to 5. So over here I have rhymes. Idет, таза, рога, тая, and blah, blah, blah. And it's over here, and it has all the pictures. And look how much text it has. Look how much text it has. Just 3 lines. Can you see? And the whole thing is just pictures. What's important is pictures and rhymes, what that I say when I turn the pages. Over here, I also have that book that my child was reading about raining and the 2 friends missing playtime. I also have, I have lots of Russian books here because this is Moy Dadir, about learning to brush yourself, how it's important to brush teeth and blah, blah, blah. And then after reading this book, you can also watch a cartoon. And some rhymes in English. It's a spider, hickory dickory dock, mosquito one, and other rhymes. So it's important for me that she doesn't just, like if I'm talking about my child, because these two stages are very important for me. That she holds the book and knows that the rhyme, the song is in the book. Okay, the next stage is emergent from 5 to 8 years old. So over here, this is the book. Look how tiny, teeny. And if you open it, I see crayons. I see scissors. That's it. I see books. I see desks. I see chairs. I see children. I see school. So I see sentence stem is the same, just nouns change. And when a child reads this book, one sentence on each page, one page, another page, another page, 10 pages, and then he or she thinks, wow, I read the whole book. I am a hero. I finished the whole book. I want to do another one. And it gives a great sense of accomplishment that you finished the whole book. So there are lots of, it's actually scholastic books. And there are one-word books. When I grow up, I can be anything I want to be. One word, a doctor, a farmer, and etc. So this level has only one sentence on a page. But then when they master it, you cannot keep them too long with this stage. You give them books with 2 sentences on a page or 3 sentences on a page. These are not A levels, E, K. So for example, Curious George series has that many lines. So if you see, can you see that design? Can you see colors, illustration, the font size, how big it is, and how clear you can read it? And it's also important to give them different genres. For example, what time it is. So it's not history, it's not a story. I mean, it's not a story. It doesn't have heroes, but it still has big fonts. It still has lots of pictures. It has concept of time. It has a couple lines over here, a couple lines here. And students say, oh, Miss Saida, you're reading nonfiction. And when you ask them, how do you know it's nonfiction? It's not a story. They say, because it has real pictures. So pictures of real people and real human beings. It's not one person. It's not made up hero. So this is the stage for first grade. Next, we call transitional or pre-fluent. So here we have, like, I put it here because my child loves this cartoon. And I was curious how I can bring book connecting with cartoon. And I found this, it's not a book, it's a journal for photos, but it has some lines here and her favorite characters. So I put it here, but it's not pre-fluent, it's over here. So for pre-fluent, the Everywhere Bear is here, the Gruffalo's Child, Muchatzakatucha. Muchatzakatucha is a really interesting text to read. Eric Carle, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. And you may ask, what? You don't read Very Hungry Caterpillar to kindergarten students or grade 1? Yes, you do, but they don't read it themselves. You read it to them. But on this stage, they have to read it themselves. They have to be able to read letters themselves. And the last line I don't have that much because I don't teach higher grades and I have very limited library. But I do have books from Macmillan, and we have levels behind, right? The Enormous Crocodile by Roald Dahl, and some experiments in physics written in English. Now, over here, I have a stack of books I bought today in a bookshop. They are written, they're published in Uzbekistan. Some of them are published in Russia. So for books from Russia, I was really happy to see this series. It says, программа «Начни читать». Уровень 1 – учусь читать. Уровень 2 – уже читаю. Уровень 3 – читаю хорошо. So remember, if we had 4 levels in a Western system, here they've started introducing 3, and behind the book you can see уровень 1 – учусь читать. And if you open it, so this much text. In comparison to that, when you take уровень 3, like the highest, this is the lowest, and this is the highest. You open it, this much text, and this much text. Now, when it comes to books published in Uzbekistan, so here's a book, and it's called Ayıkçaning Tüşü Gayrat Majid. So I open it, and I see poems and beautiful illustrations. I really liked it. I really like the style. I like that the font is big. I like that it's on white background. And when I talk about background and style, look at this book. Money in a Pot, Khumchadagi Pullar, Dengi v Garshochki. So this book is written in 3 languages. It's one tale in 3 languages. And when you open it, the first impression is I don't want to read it because the font is not clear, and it has a lot of text. 2 languages in one book is not really child friendly. And the design is also overwhelming. This is Lev Tolstoy's Vanya va Buyan short story. And it's written in 2 languages, like the previous one. But it has better design, it has bigger font, and even if it has 2 languages, I could still read it. And it has a photo of a portrait of the writer. And ideal classroom library or home library should have level tabs. And over here, I have level tabs. Can you see it? So this, over here, I have books in Russian. 1 tab for books in Russian, which could be leveled, but I don't do that. Over here, I have books in English, lots of them. And look how many books I have in Uzbek. It's almost empty. And you know what? This is a big, big problem because our children in 21st century, they are attached to their mobile phones, to their iPads. And if we want to teach them to read, there should be more books. But what can we do if we don't have those books? First of all, pick the ones that have less text, good design, and big font. Second, pick the books we have already, even if they're in Russian or in English, and read them in Uzbek. That's what I do. Eventually, we will have more books, I hope. And last thing I would like to share is, so these were things we talked about. And content is one of the reasons why we don't read in Uzbek, because usually those books are outdated. They have tales in this contrast, evil and bad, yaxshi yomon, yaxshilik yomonlik. Someone has to be rewarded, someone has to be punished, and that's it. We don't have books about, like, maybe there are some, but they're not so popular. Friendship, about childhood, about, you know, what matters to children. So, and the last slide is these websites are on these websites you can find lots of books for free, including the ones that I showed you. We have one Pop Mom Book Russian website, and I really hope one day when we will be sharing such resources, we will add one resource, online resource in Uzbek, so we can put really good books in one place. Thank you for your attention. I'm sorry for taking more than 40 minutes.
No, thank you so much. Yes, we all enjoyed, and thanks for sharing your passion for reading. And yeah, we can all see how passionate you are. Okay, let's move on to questions. Any questions, please?
Just 1 second. I need to charge my computer.
Kushnamo, you had a question?
Yeah. Hi, Notrapa. Hi, Saida. It was very interesting webinar. Thank you so much for organizing that kind of webinars. I have a question to Saida. Saida, is there any criteria for levels, like as you informed us, level A, B, C, D, like this? And how can we identify in what level are our kids? Is there any criteria or rubrics for that levels?
Yeah, thank you for your question. That's very important. I was actually thinking the same thing, because we don't have fountains and panel system in Russian or Uzbek. How can we identify their level? Actually, we can come up, like, you know, you as a teacher come up with your own criteria. You can come up with your own criteria, what I'm doing right now is I'm compiling the list of high frequent words in Russian and Uzbek. So it's not scientifically proven. It is not used by all teachers, but I have my own list of high frequent word pronouns, you know, some high frequent verbs, high frequent nouns. And I see if a child can read those, that's already A, B, or C. Like, you take a approximate measure. So high frequent words is one. Can you hear me? My daughter is back and she's reading books.
Yeah, it's okay.
Ты можешь взять книжку и в другой комнате, пожалуйста? Смотри, сколько людей тут слушает. Идем, скажи всем. Здрасте, скажи. Здрасте, здрасте. So one of the possibilities, high frequent words, and then another one is how a child reading the full sentences. Is a child reading without omitting any words, or is a child reading adding words that do not exist in the text? So it's actually hard to answer, but you can have your own, like, 4 level. I have my 4 levels, like, you know, like early stage, emergent, transitional, and fluent. I don't have ABC. We don't have it, but we can identify them based on the quantity of words they know, based on the finished sentences they can read. And in the last stage, they should be able to answer questions, retell, make interpretations, summarize. So if they can do that, that's their level, without labeling A, B, C, D, E.
Thank you so much for your answer, Saida.
So, but what about in English? Those that, can you share the test from the book, the canal book? So you've been mentioning, right? So that people have a kind of an idea what it is.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I can share it.
Thank you.
And I was amazed when I was reading Sharon Taberski's book. She didn't mention any assessment sheets. She had other tools, and I will share those too as an appendix.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions?
To say honestly, we have so much questions, but it is not okay to ask all of them here. I want to ask Saida share her Telegram account. If it is possible, we will contact her and ask our questions because her webinar was very, very interesting and very useful for us teachers. If it is possible, Saida, can you share your Telegram account so that
yeah,
we can
I put it down on a chat, in the chat.
Okay, done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can I ask a question, Dan? Yeah, as you mentioned, it's really important to read in any language, and here in Canada as well, teachers encourage, like they say, like just read to them. So first of all, it doesn't matter whether they read themselves or the parents teach. That's all read. That's also very important. And also that it doesn't matter yet. Reading skills are transferable. So if someone is kind of fluent reader in his or her own language, then there are more chances that he or she will be fluent in another language as well. So therefore, yeah, you shouldn't be kind of worried saying only just read in one language, right? So they're all beneficial. Yeah. But I wanted to question about what do you think about this, you know, in Uzbek and Russian, so because that's a tradition that we have from Russian, is that they pay attention to the speed of reading. Right, so especially in this elementary school, I remember they would count, right, how many letters you can read in 1 minute, right? So the faster reader you are, kind of supposedly you are the best student, right? But what do you think about it?
Yeah. Actually, everyone has their own pace, reading pace. And if they're reading quickly or if they're reading slowly, but they're conferring the meaning, they can comprehend what they're reading. That's what matters. And the teacher, the great teacher is there who can be patient enough to wait for a student who's reading slowly to finish their reading in their own pace, because we don't know what the reasons are. That can be a child with special needs, or, you know, like background events that have other, like we don't know what happened to a child that stops him from reading fluently. But it's not a marker. It's not это не показатель.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, Nodrapa, can it be an assessment system? No. So because I mentioned in some schools that they assess our kids by this that you said, that fast reading. Does it make any sense? I wonder.
No. As we said with Saida, it's not, as she said, it's not показатель. It doesn't matter really, right? Yeah. Because we are all different.
You know this trend for ментальная арифметика?
Oh, yes.
It's good, yeah. If it's another strategy. But when you make it as a priority, as the only one, when student knows, but you know, there are so many ways to understand why 2 times 2 is 4. Why? How can you explain your thinking? What can you do? What can you use to show that 2 times 2 is 4? Let's not say 2 times 2 is 4. Why 4? I don't know. 2 times 2 is 4. So even this methodology, unless you don't become, you know, fan of it, like, you know, like не фанатеть, yeah, and use it as oh, look, my child can count so quickly high numbers and he's the hero. If your child can explain what it means, 500 times 2020, 24. That's great. He's a genius. But usually this methods, they don't give opportunity to explain the thinking. And explain thinking is more important. Like quality is more important than quantity.
Yeah, exactly. And the same is for reading, right? So like no matter how fast they read, right? The main thing is how much they understand and whether they enjoy that, right? So that's also really important.
I would like, yeah, to add that I run a reading club, and everyone thinks that I read a lot because I run a reading club, and we have so many reading meetings, and every month there's a new book and there's another book, and we have a discussion, and then this and that. People think, oh my God, she reads books during meetings, she reads books at work, and maybe at her free. No, I don't read that much. And when I come to those meetings, sometimes I say, girls, I'm sorry, can I just listen what you're talking about? Because I didn't have a chance to read, and I just want to be part of the discussion. And I will not be giving silly questions about plot because I didn't read it. But you know what? In this world, there's so much to do, there's so much to read. If you think, oh, I'm gonna read 100 books in this year, like as an adult, we don't have those stages as children, right? As an adult, if you think I'm gonna, like, if you can do it and enjoy it, fine. But please don't harm yourself by saying, oh, I haven't read 10 books this month. If you read one book, you're a hero. Like, but how meaningful it was. Like, if you read Utkan Kullar in English, like Mark's translation, like, or Malinki Prince, I read it when I was a school child, and I reread it recently, and it was a completely different reflection. This tiny book gives so much reflection about adult life, about how we were thinking about life when we were children, and what we think about life when we became adults. And a little thing to add, you know, in international schools, private schools, they have money to buy books, to have libraries. And I understand that our city and other cities in Uzbekistan, they may not have good libraries. But you know what? Nowadays, there are parents who promote reading. There are directors and principals who promote reading. If you take initiative as a teacher to create little mini library in your classroom, take children to that store. Even if you don't buy anything, show them those books. See what they choose, what they're interested in, and then talk about it to parents, to principal. And maybe they'll allocate some funds to buy some books, so you have your own mini library in your classroom, in English, in Russian, in Uzbek. I found today this book in a bookshop, and it has this much text, and it's in English, and I was like, yay, now we have, like, you don't have to online, like order online from America or somewhere, fancy levels, mini, you know, not text heavy, we say not text heavy books, and paid in dollars. You can go to our local shops, they already have it. It's not like they don't have millions of books, but still. Thank you. That was not asked, but I forgot to say it.
Yeah, thank you. And then Nargiza asked, do you think it's useful to make children to learn topics by heart? And I would add, like, to learn, like, memorize the, say, stories by heart? And what do you think?
You know, I had an experience working with adults when I just gave a birth to my daughter, and I was on maternity leave, and I decided, look, adults, like, you know, 25, 30 plus people learned English some time ago in their childhood, and now they are not abiturient, right? They cannot go to study center and say, oh, I want to study English. They're like, there are no specific services. I decided, why don't I try to become a teacher for adults? And when they would come, first thing I would say, write something about yourself in Russian or Uzbek. So they would write, my name is, I am this much old, I have a family, I work here and there. And then we would translate it into English. And then I would ask them to memorize it. for adults, that works because you create the text yourself. The topic is not created somewhere by someone. It's authentic, it's about you. You write it yourself, you translate it yourself, and then you memorize facts about yourself. But when you're given topic, like we were given when we were school children, and it's just a ready text written by someone, you have no idea what the word choice is. Like, it has to be a really interesting topic or well written for you to just memorize it. But if you don't have your own effort when creating the story, I don't think it's worth it. No.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think we're done with the questions. Yeah, that's a really interesting topic. And yeah, some people mentioned that we have to continue this topic. Yes, and spark the reading, right? So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for your invite, and thanks everyone for listening. If you all have more questions later, please feel free to email. I'm not an expert yet. As I said, it's my passion. I'm exploring it. And with the assessment tools, I will post it later for sure.
Thank you so much.
Have big picture.
Yes, I'll share in our group as soon as Saida shares all the links and materials. Thank you so much for everyone. Yes, and as I mentioned, if you're interested in getting the certificates, I wrote the details. If not, go to our Mentor Hub group. And yeah, stay tuned. And tomorrow we have another webinar at the same time. So yeah, come and join us. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Enjoy
much.
your evening.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.